There's a map hanging on the wall of the White House Situation Room, and it's been there since 1961. For decades, it has quietly told presidents one simple truth. America sits at the center, flanked by two oceans, surrounded by allies shaded in blue. The English-speaking world, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, was the inner circle, the family, the alliance that never broke. Every president who sat under that map understood it instinctively. But today, that map lies. What just unfolded across 3 continents in the last 72 hours isn't a trade spat, and it isn't a mere diplomatic disagreement. It is the most consequential restructuring of the Anglosphere since 1931, and almost nobody is explaining it correctly. If you want to understand it, you have to rewind 6 days. This didn't begin in London or Ottawa. It started with a single interview, a few words broadcast globally, received in the worst possible way. Trump sat down with a conservative outlet last Wednesday and was asked about Canada and Australia. His reply wasn't measured. It wasn't diplomatic. He said, "Australia is a nice country, beautiful beaches, but they need us more than we need them. If they want to play footsie with Carney and his little Canada club, that's fine. But when China comes knocking, they better not come crying to us." Then he added, "The UK, Starmer is weak. He's got no spine. Britain used to be great. Now they can't even control their own borders. If they want to join the loser coalition, let them." Stop and let that sink in. America's oldest ally, the nation that fought with the United States in Normandy, Korea, the Gulf, and Afghanistan, the nation that shared its intelligence infrastructure more fully than any other, had just been called part of a loser coalition on camera. Within 40 minutes, that clip was in Downing Street. Prime Minister Starmer watched it twice and immediately called his foreign secretary. "Get me Carney tonight." By 9 p.m., a 3-way secure call linked London, Ottawa, and Canberra. 3 leaders, 3 time zones, 1 conclusion. 2 hours and 14 minutes later, the Commonwealth Economic Security Compact existed, the most consequential alliance these 3 nations had signed in nearly a century. But the mainstream coverage missed the backstory. The interview wasn't the cause, it was the spark. The real fuel had been building for months. 3 weeks before, Trump's trade team had sent London a set of demands. Sources called them colonial in tone and delusional in content. He wanted Britain to align its agricultural standards with the US, including chlorinated chicken, hormone-treated beef, and genetically modified grains. He demanded sanctions on any British company doing business with Huawei or Chinese tech, threatening billions in contracts and derailing Britain's 5G rollout. And he wanted 40% of North Sea energy exports diverted to the US, at a discount, purely to lower American gas prices ahead of the midterms. When Starmer read this, he reportedly said, "He thinks we're a gas station with a parliament." That phrase leaked and gave Starmer political cover to act decisively. Trump didn't just insult Britain, he demanded it surrender its sovereignty while calling it a loser. Starmer, a seasoned human rights lawyer, understood the weight of words, the permanence of contracts, and the difference between loyalty and extortion. The special relationship had just become too costly to maintain. Meanwhile, markets were watching. This wasn't speculation, it was evidence. The Commonwealth Economic Security Compact wasn't a handshake or warm communique. It was operational, enforceable, and built for decades, not election cycles. It had 4 pillars: resource integration, financial architecture, defense industrial coordination, and immigration and talent mobility. Canada and Australia, controlling massive portions of uranium, lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, would create a commodity exchange, priced in Commonwealth currencies, the Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, and British pound, not the US dollar. This wasn't small. Every shipment traded outside the dollar weakened US financial dominance. London became the clearing hub, with currency swaps between the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, and Reserve Bank of Australia. American banks and regulators were effectively bypassed. Washington didn't even get a copy of the email. The defense pillar was just as dramatic. Next-generation fighter components, submarine programs, nuclear technology, rare earth magnets, all sourced within the compact nations, without US supply chains. They were building weapons independently. The immigration pillar enabled professionals to move freely across 3 continents, creating a talent pool of 110 million people that US companies would now compete with rather than draw from. And the compact is designed for 25 years with automatic renewal. Trump made calls. They built a civilization. 2 days after the infamous interview, Trump called Starmer. He threatened tariffs, intelligence cuts, and a cancelled state visit. Starmer's reply, calm and precise, circulated through every embassy. Scotch whisky survived wars and prohibition. Intelligence cooperation was reciprocal, and the state visit could wait for conditions conducive to productive dialogue. By the 9th minute, the call ended. 10 minutes later, Starmer was on the phone with Carney, confirming Britain's entry into the compact. Threats had been made, and the compact remained. Markets reacted immediately. The pound surged 1.8% against the dollar, the Canadian dollar 1.3%, the Australian dollar 2.1%. The US dollar index dropped 1.9% in 90 minutes, the largest single-session decline in half a year. Gold and Bitcoin rallied. S&P 500 opened down 2.4%, with financials leading the fall. Meanwhile, London, Toronto and Sydney indices climbed, reflecting capital flowing to three nations, bypassing US systems. Commonwealth 3, America 0. Mark Carney held a press conference in Ottawa, flanked by Canadian, British and Australian flags, the absence of the US flag deafening. He framed the compact not as a strike against any nation, but as a project of stability, predictability and prosperity. The Western Alliance was built on trust, he said. We are relocating trust to where it still exists. 5 words that redraw the global map. Psychology played a central role. Trump's approach is extraction. Squeeze, demand, threaten, punish. Carney's approach is construction. Demonstrate value, present alternatives, build systems. When Trump threatened Canada, Carney coordinated with Australia. When he threatened Australia, Carney called London. Every threat became a recruitment tool. Starmer's role was pivotal. Britain, historically loyal to Washington, had a legal and moral framework to honour. Trump's threats were met with calm, calculated resolve. Britain signed on, and the compact solidified. The Anglosphere was no longer a given. It had to be actively built, and now it had been. This isn't abstract. It touches your daily life. The dollar's strength relies on global demand. If 3 major economies now trade outside the dollar, demand for the currency drops. Imports cost more. Investments shrink. Mortgages rise. American exporters lose market share. Boeing, Caterpillar, and countless others now compete against preferential compact arrangements. Jobs, security, finances, all affected. Intelligence sharing is partially rerouted. GCHQ, Australia's monitoring stations, signals that keep the US informed are now partially independent. Trump's dominance has made America deaf in a louder world. Markets, supply chains, and alliances all shift in real time. The consequences are immediate, measurable, and historically significant. Future scenarios are grim. One path is retaliation. Tariffs, restricted access, media campaigns painting the compact as aggression. Compact nations respond in kind, diverting trade and financial flows. European nations watch, considering alternatives. China locks in its own resource deals. The spiral has no clear ending. Another path is an off-ramp. Washington intervenes, negotiates formally, stabilizes relations, but the compact itself remains. 25 years of architecture, contracts, and supply chains already exist. Systems endure, personalities fade. 3 of the bluest nations on the old White House map have redefined what blue means. Not a commitment, but a strategic choice. America didn't lose the Anglosphere in war. It lost it in phone calls, threats, demands, and a single on-camera insult calling its oldest friends a loser coalition. And now, the question hangs in the air. Is this the start of a post-American world order, or can Washington find an off-ramp? Is Mark Carney saving the Western world by building around an unstable America, or accelerating fragmentation that will hurt everyone, including the Commonwealth nations themselves? And most importantly, how does this reshape your trust, your money, and your perspective on the decade ahead? The story isn't over, but the map has already changed. The world didn't notice it immediately, but the consequences of the Commonwealth Economic Security Compact ripple far beyond government halls. Every shipment of uranium, every ton of lithium, every barrel of oil moving through this new framework chips away at the dominance of the US dollar in global markets. This isn't some theoretical risk. It's measurable. When global demand for the dollar drops, Everything priced in dollars rises: coffee, electronics, medicine, gas, and American consumers feel it instantly. Mortgages go up, investments underperform, retirement accounts shrink. Companies like Boeing, Caterpillar, and other US exporters now compete with compact-favored alternatives. Jobs are affected. Production lines shift. The ground under the American economy subtly but decisively tilts. The intelligence world also shifts. Five Eyes, the historic intelligence alliance, relies on trust. When the US weaponizes intelligence for political leverage, that trust erodes. Britain, Canada, and Australia can now share intelligence directly, bypassing Washington, creating partial blind spots for US agencies. GCHQ's signals intelligence, Australia's submarine tracking, and the connective tissue that makes US intelligence global are partially diverted. Trump's approach: dominance, threats, extortion, has made the US deaf in a world that's getting louder. Carney, Starmer, and Albanese act in precise opposition. They construct, coordinate, and fortify alliances without noise, without drama, without extracting loyalty. Threats become tools to build cohesion elsewhere. The old Anglosphere, once assumed to be unshakable, is now deliberately realigned. Markets are the clearest signal of this shift. The moment the compact was announced, London's FTSE, Toronto's TSX, and Sydney's ASX surged while Wall Street bled. Capital flows have shifted. American banks lose fees. Foreign institutions bypass US intermediaries. The US dollar index took its largest single-session drop in 6 months. Gold, Bitcoin, and other alternative stores of value spiked. Money talks where words fail. For decades, the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency gave Washington enormous leverage. That leverage is now partially ceded, not by accident, but by deliberate construction of alternatives by the very allies once considered inseparable. The psychology here is striking. Trump believes dominance is automatic, instinctive, and sufficient. Carney believes in planning, in structure, in trust. Starmer and Albanese mirror that philosophy. Measured, deliberate, patient. Every threat from the US only accelerated the compact's adoption. The more Washington demanded, the more the compact grew. Every insult, every call, every aggressive demand became a recruiting tool, pulling nations closer together while pushing Washington further out. It's an inversion of influence. Coercion repels, construction attracts. The leaders of Britain, Canada, and Australia are building a civilization designed to endure, independent of the US's current volatility. 25 years. That is the horizon of the compact. Contracts are binding, infrastructure is being created, financial networks are solidifying, defense coordination is underway, talent mobility is formalized. Even if 5 successive US presidents were rational and predictable, the compact is already embedded. Systems endure, personalities fade. Carney's genius lies not in domination, not in immediate headline-grabbing moves, but in the slow, quiet creation of durable structures that no single disruptive personality can easily undo. While Trump dominated with chaos, Carney constructs with permanence. The map in the White House Situation Room, blue shading representing allies, no longer reflects commitment. It reflects choice, deliberate and consequential. This isn't an abstract global story. It hits home in every American wallet, every balance sheet, every investment portfolio. The price of imported goods rises, mortgage rates tick upward. American companies lose market share abroad. Workers compete against labor mobility across 3 continents. Even the military-industrial complex feels it. Components and materials once funneled through US suppliers are now traded internally within the compact. America's strategic advantage, once taken for granted, is now challenged by foresight and coordination. The Western world's architecture isn't collapsing, it's relocating. Washington is no longer the default hub. Stability, predictability, and mutual prosperity now anchor elsewhere. And yet, this story is as much about psychology as it is about markets or contracts. Trump's approach is short-term extraction, a compulsion masquerading as strategy. Carney's approach is long-term construction, a vision masquerading as pragmatism. The contrast could not be starker. One storms, threatens, and dominates. The other plans, coordinates, and endures. One undermines, the other fortifies. And today, three nations have chosen fortification over dominance. The result is not just a shift in alliances, but a restructuring of global influence that may define the next generation. The real question, the one that matters most, isn't whether Trump regrets these moves, it's whether Washington can adapt. Can the US recognize that coercion no longer guarantees influence? Can it rebuild trust with nations that no longer see it as indispensable? Or will it continue a path where personality and impulse dictate policy, while structure and foresight determine outcomes elsewhere? The compact is already signed. The supply chains are designed. Financial flows bypass American banks. Defense coordination sidesteps US production. Talent mobility creates global competition. Systems are enduring. Personalities are transient. So, when you look at your bank account, your mortgage statement, your investment portfolio, remember this: decisions made in the span of a single interview, a few phone calls, and a handful of threats have already restructured your financial reality. The Anglosphere, once assumed to be a guaranteed sphere of influence for the United States, now has its own infrastructure, its own rules, its own autonomy. Mark Carney, Starmer, and Albanese have quietly redrawn the map. The consequences are real, measurable, and long-lasting. The world order may be entering a post-American era not through war, not through conquest, but through deliberate planning, resilience, and coordination. And the final takeaway, the lesson that every citizen, investor, and policymaker must internalize, is simple. Influence no longer comes from domination alone. It comes from building systems that endure, alliances that are resilient, and trust that is earned. The blue on the map is now a choice, not a given. The world is changing beneath our feet. Money moves. Supply chains shift. Talent relocates. Defense systems operate independently. And through it all, the United States watches as its oldest allies quietly but decisively construct a future that no single personality can disrupt. This is the story of the Commonwealth Economic Security Compact, the story of a post-American Anglosphere, and the story of how systems, not threats, define the next 25 years. And now, the question is yours. Will Washington adapt, or will it continue to lose influence while its allies build civilization without it? Will the US find an off-ramp, or is this the dawn of a new world order? This is the moment history will remember. The map has changed. The rules have shifted. And the consequences, financial, strategic, and geopolitical, will be felt for decades.